gewaltig. So yesterday we learned the Mishnah that had a machlokes as to whether or not we should allow vendors to prepare everything in the market. That means to harvest and to grind and to sift flour so that they could sell it on the first day of Cholamoid. They could sell the new wheat, the new crop, in the markets right after the carbon was brought. And the Chachamim said that they were very unhappy with it because it would be too dangerous. Because if people are going to have all the food prepared and ready to go, it means that they would have cut the omer before the carbon was brought, and they would have harvested and they would have grinded it. And that's not good because we're afraid that somebody might put it into his mouth while he's doing the harvest. On the other hand, Rabbi Yehuda wasn't concerned about it. So the Gemara says, so we have over here in our Mishnah where the Chachamim are concerned that while someone is working with something, he might eat it. And Rabbi Yehuda was not concerned. The Gemara asks a stira because we have a brisa where Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim take the opposite stance. And that was, should we allow B'dikas Chametz after the Zman Habir? Rabbi Yehuda said, no. Rabbi Yehuda was concerned, unlike in our Mishnah where he's not concerned, by Chametz he is concerned, because if you uncover Chametz while you're searching for Chametz, you might accidentally forget and eat it. Better don't do it at all. The Chacham say there's no need to be concerned, even on Yom Tov itself. Even on Yom Tov itself, you can check for Chametz, and we're not worried you'll eat it. So it seems that the Chachamim are contradicting what they're saying in the Mishnah, and Rabbi Yehuda is contradicting what he says in our Mishnah. So why would Rabbi Yehuda hold that we don't need to be concerned by the case of Chadosh, yet we do need to be concerned by Chametz? So Rabba offered up a teretz, Amar Rabba, Shani Chadosh, the Isser of Chadosh is less, Rabbi Yehuda is less concerned about it than he would be about Chametz. Why is that? Zok Gemara, because they couldn't harvest it in the normal fashion. They had to just pull the grain out. And since you're harvesting it in an unusual fashion, Zocharu, he will remember that he cannot eat it. But by B'dikas Chametz, when you uncover Chametz, we are concerned that you might eat it. Amalei Abai, Teinach Ktsira. I understand during the Ktsira process, since it's done differently than it typically is done, I understand why there would be no concern that he's going to eat it. But there's more processes that are done before it becomes ready to be sold in the market. There's there's techina, grinding, varkada, and sifting. And if those are done in the normal fashion, why are we not concerned that the person working with it will eat from it before the carbon lamer? Michael Lamer. Even the grinding, we don't allow chadash to be ground before the Omer is brought. We don't allow chadash to be ground in a regular mill, only in a hand mill. And our kada, the sifting, was also not done in a normal fashion. It would be al gabe nab. It wouldn't be inside the sifter. They would turn the sifter upside down and sift in an unusual fashion. So being that all of the work with the new grain is not done in the normal fashion, we would remember that he's not allowed to eat it. And that is why Rabbi Yehuda was not concerned by the Omer. Right to Gemara, what about Beis HaShlochem? If you have a field that doesn't get enough irrigation and you have to manually irrigate it, and if you leave the tefua there, it can get ruined, Rashi says. And therefore, Chazal allowed cutting of the tefua of the chadash even before the Omer carbon, with normal cutting. So Beis HaShlochem, the Sharik Tzira, it's not kochen Beis HaShlochem Sheba Mokin. You're not allowed to pile them up normally, but you're allowed to cut it normally like a regular harvest. Why wasn't Rabbi Yehuda concerned in that scenario that someone might eat some of the wheat? Amar Abaye, a much simpler teretz. Chadash badal minei, chametz loy badal minei. Chadash, we're not eating Chadash a whole year. We're going to transition to be Matir Chadash. So since people are in the mode of not eating the Chadash, we're not concerned that they might mistakenly eat the Chadash. But Chametz is something that people eat all year long. It's very much part of their regular daily activities. So if we allow them to search for Chametz, it's possible that they'll forget and they'll eat the Chametz. And that's the difference why Rabbi Yehuda is Machmer by Pesach, but he's not Machmer by the Omer, by the Chadash. So Amar Rava, the Rabbi Yehuda Kasha. We addressed this problem with the steer in Rabbi Yehuda, but the Rabbanan Loi Kasha, is it not a steer in the Rabbanan as well, where in our Mishnah they're concerned, yet by Chametz they're not concerned? Ela Amar Rava, the Rabbi Yehuda Loi Kasha Kiddishaninan. Like we answered, Abaye said, Chadash Bad L'Minei, Chametz Le'Bad L'Minei. The Rabbanan Loi Kasha, you know why it's not a problem according to Rabbanan? Even though if the Rabbanan are concerned by Chadash that'll eat it, when someone's seeking Chametz, we're not concerned that'll eat it, because who atzmai mechazer alav l'sarfai meichel achal minei. What is he looking for the Chametz for? He knows he's on a mission to find Chametz to destroy it, so he shouldn't be over bal yiram bal yimatzeh. So if someone who's on a mission to destroy Chametz, he's not in that frame of mind where he might eat it by mistake. And therefore, the Rabbanan hold that by Chametz we don't need to worry. Rabashi Omar, Rabashi wanted to offer another teretz. So the teretz that we written now is Abaye's teretz, and that is Chametz loy badal inish minei and Chadash badal inish minei. But Rabashi wanted to offer a different teretz. The Rabbi Yehuda Lekasha Kemach Koli Tanan. It doesn't say in our Mishnah that Kemach and Koli was found in the market. It said Kemach of Koli, meaning flour of wheat that has already been dried out in the fire. And Rashi tells us that once the wheat is dried out in the fire, that wheat's not edible. So therefore, we're not concerned that while someone grounds the flour, he's going to eat it, because the roasted wheat kernels are no longer edible. It's either a joke or it's outside the norms of logic. Why? We understand when you get up to the point where you've already roasted the kernels, there it won't be edible, so we don't need to worry about somebody eating it. But ad kali ma'ikalamemer, this wheat has to be cut down and it has to be roasted. So during that period of time, why would Rabbi Yehuda not be concerned that the person working with the wheat would eat it? And if you're going to say, like what we said earlier, that you don't cut it normally, the problem is, what about if it was wheat that was cut from a Beis HaShlachin, where a normal ktir is allowed? Why isn't Rabbi Yehuda worried that someone working with the wheat, cutting it down, might eat some of it, and that will be Chodosh? Therefore, we have to reject Rabashi's teretz, and the only teretz that we have remaining to distinguish why Rabbi Yehuda is not goyzer by Chodosh is because Chodosh badal inish minei, and he is goyzer by Chametz because Chametz loy badal inish minei. Sagt der Heilige Mishnah weiter. Mishikarev ha'omer. Once the omer was already brought, hutar Chodosh miyad. Chodosh becomes mutar right away. Harachokin mutarin mechatzois hayoim ulehalom. And those who live far away from the Beis HaMikdash and can't not be certain that the carbon was brought, from chatzois hayoim, they could already assume that the carbon was brought, and they would be able to eat from the new crop. Mishachar Beis HaMikdash. When the Beis HaMikdash was charav, Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai sheyoim hanav kol yaser. Now the Pashup shot, and this is going to be a big discussion in the Gemara, but the Pashup shot is that when there's a carbon omer, because we'll see in the Gemara, the Pasuk seems to say two things. It says ad etzem hayom hazeh, and it says ad yoim haviyachem, until you bring the omer. So we learn when there's an omer, then the Chodesh is Aser until that crop is Omer. But Mishachar Beis HaMikdash. And there is no longer Omer First thing in the morning on the 16th day of Nisan, the Chodesh is automatically mutter. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was masakin. Yom Hanaf Kula Aser. That the day 16 will be Aser until the end of the day. And we're going to see a lot of discussion in the Gemara, the reason for this takana, or if it even is a takana, or maybe it's a deraisa. There'll be a lot of discussion around Rabbi Yochanan's reasoning, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's reasoning, that the full day of the 16th, the Chodesh is Aser. Rabbi Yehuda, V'aloi min ha-Torah Aser. Rabbi Yehuda says, what do you mean Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai needed to make a takana? It's Aser midaraisa. Shenemar ad etzem hayoim hazeh, which he understands until the ad bechlal, until the end of that day. So ibazoi b'pnei mahar chaykim mutar mechayot sayoim ulahlon. So b'pnei mahar chaykim is not relevant to the discussion between Yehuda and Rabbi Zakkai. It's just going back to the beginning of the Mishnah, where it said that according to everybody, by the Beis Hamikdash, when there was a carbon emer, the chaykim are mutar mechayot sayoim ulahlon. The reason for that is yes, technically you could bring the Omer all day, but everyone could be very confident that Bezin gets it done right away in the morning, and therefore by Chatzois you could be guaranteed that the carbon Omer was brought and the new crop would be mutter. Zok the Hen of the Gemara. Rav and Shmuel both said, when do we have a Beis Hamikdash? Omer matir. The carbon omer was matir. Therefore, they had to wait until the carbon omer was actually brought, or until Chatzos, where they can be sure that in Yerushalayim the carbon was brought. But bisman shein Beis Hamikdash kayim. Now that we don't have a Beis Hamikdash anymore, heyer mizrach matir. The moment the day lights up on the day of the 16th day, the Mizrach, the light of the day is matir, and the new Chodesh is automatically mutter to eat. My time, where do you see in the Psukim that there's this two-tiered way to be matir the Chodesh? Now, come up because Trey Kroy Ksivi. There's two Psukim that seem to be contradictory. Ksiv ad haviyachem. In one pasuk it says that the Chodesh is also until you bring the new carbon. Uchsiv, the pasuk also says ad etzem hayoim hazeh, meaning until the day. So how do you solve the conflict between these two psukim? Haketzad kam bizman shabeis hamikdash kaim. When the Beis Hamikdash is kaim and the karbanos were brought, then the chodesh is also until you brought the karbonomer. But kan bizman shein Beis Hamikdash kaim. If there is no karbonomer brought, so that the time of the morning of the 16th day is what is matir the chodesh. That's what Rav and Shmuel said. Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish had a different approach. No Amri Tavayu, Afilu Bizman Beis Hamikdash Kayim Heyer Mizrach Matir. Even when the Beis Hamikdash was Kayim first thing in the morning already, the Chodesh became mutter. It was not dependent upon the bringing of the carbon. I frank the Gemara of Oksiv Ataviyachem. So the Gemara Lamitzvah. That's just a mitzvah the Chatchila to wait until the carbon is brought. But the Isser Lav, to eat Chodosh, is gone the moment the day lights up on the 16th of Nisan. Mishakarav Omer Putter Chodosh Miyad. Practical Gemara, how could you Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish say that the Omer is muter first thing in the morning, even before the Omer carbon is brought? Our Mishnah seems to contradict that. Our Mishnah says Mishakarav Omer Putter Chodosh miyad. Zok the Gemara la mitzvah. Our Mishnah just means there's a mitzvah not to eat the omer, not to eat the chodosh until the omer is brought, and that's what it means. Mishakar ba'omer hutar. But avad the lav already dropped off first thing in the morning. Zok the Gemara ha'omer haya matir the Medina u'shtei alechem b'mikdash. We have another Mishnah that says the Omer was matir, the new crop, to be used for personal use. And the Shtei Alechem was matir the new crop to be used in the Beis Hamikdash. So although right away it was mutter to use the new wheat from the second day of Pesach, that did not apply to being able to use the new produce as a carbon mincha to be brought in the Beis Hamikdash. For that, they needed the shtei lechem of Shavuos. But the problem is, the Mishnah does say that the Omer was matir b'Medina, not merely the fact that the sun has risen on the 16th day of Nisan. So the same teretz mitzvah. Once again, it just means there's a mitzvah to wait until after the carbon Omer, but by Ikar Adin, there's no lav for eating the Omer, eating the Chodesh once the 16th day arrives. Okay, let's turn on top of base. Mishachar Beis Hamikdash, Hiskin Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, Sheyehei Yom Hanof Kol Hayoser. The problem is, so Rav Yochanan was masakin that Yom Hanof is Kol Hayoser, even though really first thing in the morning it should be allowed. Why would Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai make such a takana if me'ikar din you're allowed to eat in the morning? And the other question is, if me'ikar din you're allowed to eat in the morning, and there's only the mitzvah to wait for the carbon omer, so now that there is not going to be a carbon omer, why should it be usher a whole day? My time, zog to Gemara, because mehera yibana Beis Hamikdash. Be'ez Hashem, we're hoping that the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt soon. But people will remember that they're allowed to eat Chodesh first thing in the morning. But now that we have a Beis Hamikdash, now we have to wait until they bring the carbon omer. Last year, we ate the Chodesh first thing in the morning on the 16th day of Nisan. Hashtanami nechel. Let's eat now as well, first thing in the morning. But people will not know the halacha. The shtakid lo have omer. Last year there was no carbon omer, and therefore heir mizrach matir. But v'hashadika omer. Now that there's an omer matir. So frek the Gemara be sol kedaitach l'mitzvah. If you're going to learn like Rabbi Yochanan or Shlokish, that we have to wait for the carbon omer is not because we'll be over allowed. First thing in the morning, there's no more allowed to eat the chadash. It's only a special mitzvah to wait until the omer. If that's the case, mishum mitzvah leikum v'ligzar. What's the downside? Let's allow chadash to be eaten first thing in the morning on the 16th. Now, what are we worried? That when the Beis Hamikdash comes, people will eat first thing in the morning? Okay, no harm done. They weren't ever allowed. They were worried they won't keep the extra special mitzvah and a muvchar to wait for the carbon omer. For that would make a takana. A takana we would make to prevent somebody from being over alav. But according to Rabbi Yochanan and Shlokish, there's no danger of being over alav because even Mizman Beis Hamikdash, first thing in the morning, the Chodesh becomes butter. Amar Nachman Yitzchak, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai b'shitas Rabbi Yehuda Amar. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said it in the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar minat Torah also. Rabbi Yehuda said, "Let me daraisa. It's also to eat chadash until the end of the day. Ad etzem yom ad v'ad b'chlal until the 16th day is over." So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai didn't make a takana. In fact, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, midaraisa, it's also to eat the omer until the end of the day. The Amar minat Torah also. Shenemar ad etzem yom hazeh. Ad itzuma shal yom, until the end of the day, until the day is over. Because sover ad v'ad b'chlal, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Yehuda holds when it said ad etzem it means until the end of that day. Zok Gemara umisaver lakavasei. Are you telling me that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai didn't answer the Yom Hanof midrabanan to midaraisa like Rabbi Yehuda? But we know it's not true because Vamiflik Polagale, we know that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai argues on Rabbi Yehuda. Ditnan we learned Mishachar Beis Hamikdash Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Shehei Yom Hanof Kulay Aser. Our Mishnah says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana, and Rabbi Yehuda argued on him. Rabbi Yehuda b'alei min Torah who also dechsiv ad Yom Hazeh. So clearly, from the conversation in the Mishnah, it's clear that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is only answering Yom Hanof and it's not midaraisa. Zok Gemara, that's not really how the Mishnah is meant to be understood. It's Rabbi Yehuda who the Katoi. Rabbi Yehuda commented to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who Osir, because he misunderstood what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said. In fact, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai also agrees that Minatayr it's Osir. So when Rabbi Yehuda came timing, it's also Minatayr, that was really based on the misunderstanding, because in fact, he's preaching to the choir. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai also holds Minatayr it's Osir. Sovar, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai midrabanan ka'amar. Rabbi Yehuda mistakenly thought that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was only saying that it's Asher Yom Banof Kuloi midrabanan, but velohi. But that wasn't the case because midaraisa ka'amar. When Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai sheyom banof kuloi Asher, it's daraisa. I afraid Gemara b'ha hiskin katani. Rabbi Yehuda is not making a mistake. The words are hiskin. Rabbi Yochanan made a takana. Takana by definition is midrabanan. So Gemara, my hiskin, darash for hiskin. It doesn't mean that it's a takana derabanan. It means people didn't know the halacha, so they weren't following it. So he darshan it, and he was misakin that people should follow the halacha. So in fact, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yochanan both agree that the Yom Hanof is kuloi asur midaraisa because it says that it's my Yom. So now we have actually machlokes between the way Rav and Shmuel understood the Gemara, that really first thing in the morning it will be mutter without the carbon, and the carbon is al-chatchila, and we have the shita of Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan who hold that midai rice it's also the whole day. So let's see what people did. Reb Papa, Reb Huna, Berei Rabbi Shua, Achli Chadash, Bu'urta de Shitzar, Nagi Shifsar. They would start eating Chadash at the end of the day after the 16th day. So in Eretz Yisrael, that was Chalamoid. And they would eat it on the 16th day in the afternoon, but I believe they were in Babel, so they ate it matzah the first days. Matzah the first days of Yom Tov, they already started using Chadash. So Nachum Achli Chadash Be'urta de Shitzer Nagi Shifser. The evening of the 17th, which would be Matzah the first days in Chutz La'aretz after the second day of Pesach. Why? Because Kasavi they held Chadash B'chutz La'aretz Derban. First of all, the whole Isser of Chadash in Chutz La'aretz, which is where they lived, is only with Derban anyway. So we're not discussing any Chash Daraisa. At the worst case scenario, it's only with Derban. U'lesveka lechashina, and you're not Chashish Vasovik. Meaning, even if you hold of Sveka Diyoima, and that's why we would be makbid even to keep the first day Chalamoid, which is the 17th day of the sun, that would be if there's a Chash Daraisa. But since there's only a Chash Darabanan, because at worst case scenario, Chadash is only Midrabanan, we're not going to ask for that Midrabanan because of Sveka Diyoima. That's what Rav Papa and Rav Huna Berei Rabbi Shua did. Rabbanan de Rav Ashi. What about the Rabbanan de Rav Ashi? They only ate it achlu b'tzafar de shifsar. They wouldn't eat it much of the first days. They would wait for the morning of the 17th, which would mean they'd come home after davening on the first day Chalamoid, and that's when they would eat chadash. What was their reasoning? Because every day held chadash b'chutz la'aretz deraisa. They held this deraisa, and therefore you have a Sveka de Yoima, they would disallow you from eating a Savik deraisa on the second day of Pesach, because we might be a day off, it might be the first day of Pesach. But they also held that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was midrabanan ka'amar. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who said that the Yom Hanof, which is the 16th day of Nisan, is also the whole day. They don't want like Rabbi Yochanan ben Shlokish, they don't like Rav and Shmuel, that's only midrabanan. Why would Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai say Yom Hanaf is Aser? That's only if we know that's the 16th day of Nisan. So in Eretz Yisrael, the first day Chalamoid, Rabbi Yochanan was misaken that it's going to be Aser midrabanan till the end of the day, because when Mashiach comes, it would be totally in the Havas HaKarban. But by Chutz La'aretz, where it's only a Sveka Diyoima, or the Sveka Lechashin. Rabbi Yochanan Zakir was only misakin that it should be the chodesh should be also the first day Chalamoid. That's when it's vade Chalamoid. But our first day Chalamoid is only a suffix, and therefore he's not going to make a gzeira on a day that it's only a suffix anyway. For Rabbanan Devei Rabashi, Ochlu B'Tzafra de Shivsar. The Rabbanan Devei Rabashi, I'm sorry, I did that right. V'chitakin l'yoymanov l'sveikaletakin. Amar Vina, Amrlu, my mother told me, Avach, your father, lo yav ochel chodesh, ela b'orta de Shivsar nagi tamnesar. Your father would only eat chodesh b'chutz la'aretz the night after the first day of Chalamoid. So he was the most makbid. Why? The Savalach Rabbi Yehuda v'chayis l'sveika. He held like Rabbi Yehuda that the entire 16th day is also midiraisa, and we have a suffix. We have a suffix if our first day of Chalamoid is either 16th or the 17th, and he was makbid even on that suffix, and therefore he waited till the end of the 17th day because it might be the 16th day based on our sveika de yom. As Rashi says, "V'savalach Rabbi Yehuda the Amar Kol Hayom Enough Osher Min HaTorah, v'Chodesh Osher v'Chutz La'aretz Daraisa." So since he held Chodesh is also Daraisa and Chutz La'aretz, and he held that Yom Enough is also Daraisa, Hilchach Chayish L'Sveika L'Hantim Kol Hayom. Therefore, he was worried about a Sveika Yom because it was a regular suffix Daraisa. Because if today, in fact, is the 16th day of Nisan, it would be also Daraisa to eat his produce until the end of the day. Kabaltik. I believe that the Shulchan Aruch Paschal that we fear like this Lashita that we won't eat new produce until the night after the first day of Chalamoid because of the Shita holds Daraisa. And the Mishnah Berurah brings down why is it that we aren't so makbid on Chodesh? Many people aren't makbid on Yoshan. He says, could be because they're going according to Shita that b'chutz la'aretz it's only mider abanan, and therefore we don't know really when something's produced, when it was produced, and the Mishnah Berurah gets into a discussion of the available wheat products when you could assume in those days in Europe when the harvest was, when they were blossomed. And therefore, there's a suffix about it. And since it's only midrabanan, that could be belabetzchus on those people that are not akbid. But the Mishnah Berurah says himself, a bal nefesh should be machmir. And then he discusses beers that are made out of grain, and there's a discussion there as well because beer maybe you can assume came from an earlier crop until they made the beer. So there's a discussion about that as well. But he does say a bal nefesh should be machmir. And only eat yashan, not eat chadash. Even nowadays, even in Chutz La'aretz. Dr. Helen Gemara weiter. Ha'omer. They also have a discussion. The Yosy Mishnah Berurah brings down a discussion. Even if you're not makbid on yashan for your regular daily food, but when it comes to a mitzvah like matzah, you should be makbid on yashan, because if in fact it is also there's an avera, so now it's a mitzvah above avera, so it would disqualify the mitzvah. So at least for a davar mitzvah, we should have yashan, and all of the matzah bakeries that we buy matzah from are all yashan. Zok the Heilige Mishnah weiter. Ha'omer hayamater b'medina u'shtei alechem b'mikdash. So after Pesach, everybody was able to eat chadash from the winter wheat, but they still wouldn't use it in the Beit HaMikdash until after Shavuos. Ein mevin menachos u'bikurim u'minchas behema koydem lo'omer. Before the carbon omer was brought, you wouldn't be allowed to bring menachos, bikurim, and minchas behema before the omer, and imhevi posel. If you brought, it would be posel. But we said that you shouldn't bring as karbonos until after Shavuos. So the Mishnah goes on, but it may be kosher. So me'ikar din, you have to wait to use the new wheat till after the shtei alechem is brought in order to use it in the Beis HaMikdash. But b'diavad, if you used it even after the omer, then the carbon would be okay. So what are these Karbonis that the Mishnah is referring to. Menachos, ubikurim, uminchas behema. So Rashi says what these are. Rashi says menachos is minchas soita, the mincha of the soita. Minchas behema would be the minchas nesachim of any behema. And bikurim, we know the parish of bikurim, you shouldn't bring before the omer. Now there's going to be a discussion as well. What about bikurim of parish ilan? That shouldn't be dependent on the omer. It's only grains, because the Isser of Chodesh only applies to the 5 grains. Zok Gemara weiter. Yosef Reb Tarfon the Kakoshalei. Reb Tarfon had a problem. He had a difficulty, and this was his difficulty. Ma ben kodim la'omer l'kodim shtei alechem. Why are we saying when it comes to using it for the Beis Hamikdash, why is there a distinction between kodim la'omer where it would be possible and kodim l'shtei alechem where it would be kosher, but l'chatchila you shouldn't use it? Ma ben kodim la'omer l'kodim shtei alechem. Amal afon of Rabbi Yehuda bar Nechemia. Yehuda bar Nechemia answered, Loyim amid kodim la'omer shekain lehuter mechlala etel hedjit. Kodim la'omer, you don't find any heter at all to use this produce, even for a hedjit. That's why it's possible even with the evet. Toiver kodim l'shtei alechem shehuter mechlala etel hedjit. Who said you would say that it's possible for karbonos after the omer, where after the omer, in fact, a hedjit's allowed to use it? Shosak Reb Tarfon. Reb Tarfon was silent, meaning that answered his question. So Reb Yehuda was very excited. He said a teretz to his Rebbe's kasher, and it was successful. So Habu Panov Shal Yehuda ben Nechemia. He became lit up. He was very excited. Amalei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva told him, Yehuda, so Habu Panecha, so Yishafta es Zakein. You are very excited. You were able to forever the kasha of Zakein of Reb Tarfon. But don't be so proud of yourself. Your Savora might be right, but the chutzpah to answer your Rebbe's kasha might have done you not too well. Timeani, I would be shocked, im tarich yomim, if you're going to live too long. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi, oise aperek prasa pesach choya. That was 2 weeks before Pesach. So now it's mamish l'blin strikes again, because that's exactly what we're holding. It was 2 weeks before Pesach. Rashi says prasa pesach was 2 weeks before, because shloshim yoyim is when you're supposed to start learning halachas, and prasa is the half of that. So we're halfway through that 30-day learning period. Kishalisa la'atzeres, when they came to be oila regel another time for Shavuos, sha'alti acher of Yehuda ben Nechemia heichanu. I asked, where is Yehuda ben Nechemia? I want to say hi. V'amali, and it was reported to me, niftar b'halachla. He died.
This is just for offering a teretz?
That's what it seems.
I don't see that there was a chutzah or anything like that.
I might be misunderstanding it. Maybe the avla wasn't that he said a teretz. Maybe it was sa'avu panecha. He had too much glee on his face.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that's what it is. It's not so much the teretz, but it's the glee on his face that I outdid my Rebbe. Maybe that's what the tzniya was. But I don't like gribbling. I don't like gribbling into the averis of these people that are so much greater than us, because it reminds me of a story that my Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak Perman, told us over from Rav David Kronglas. Rav David Kronglas Hatzal was the Meshkiach in Baltimore Yeshiva. And he was once speaking for the boys about the reason why Dinah was captured and violated by Shechem, and that's because when they met up with Esav, Yaakov put her in a box so that Esav shouldn't be able to set his eyes upon her, and he held her back from marrying Esav. So all the Mefarshim asked, which normal father would offer up his daughter to Esav? What did he do wrong? So the Baalei Mussar says he slammed down the box too hard. He sealed the box with too much glee. He was too happy about it. So one of the Bochum asked Reb David Kronglas, I don't have to aver that he was like too happy when he closed the box. Like, what did he do wrong? So Reb David Kronglas says, any aver that with your mind you can appreciate is wrong, Yaakov wouldn't have done. So it makes sense that you don't understand what the Abla was. Because if you understood the Abla, if it's an Abla that you understand is wrong, Yaakov would never have done it. So that's always been my approach. Oh, by the way, yesterday was the yard site of Nadav and Avihu. They were the heroes
That's
who
right.
took in your epic shot. They were the ones who took the fire and the focus off Aaron and put it on themselves and violated the Kasher Tziva Hashem es Moshe.
Right. I speculated maybe they did it on purpose. Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Gemara weiter. So he was no longer there. Amar Rab Nachman Yitzchak, L'divrei nu Yehuda ben Nehemiah, according to Yehuda ben Nehemiah, Nisachim bikurim she'akrivam kodim la'omer ksherim. So what is Nisachim bikurim? Rashi says, Miyayin shebiker kodim la'omer ve'krivam ksherim. If you brought Nisachim, that was wine, that you were makriv before the omer, it would be kosher. Why would it be kosher? Obviously, because it's not one of the 5 grains, so it doesn't have the problem of chadash. So the Gemara asks pshita. Of course, it's going to be muter. Zok Gemara, I'll tell you why there was a chiddush in this halacha. Ma'u detema pasam hu the huter mechlolei esel hedit. Where do you say that before the shtei alechem it would be the evet, it would be kosher if you used the grain of the chadash wheat? That's only wheat, because wheat already had a mitzvahs heter because the carbon was brought. But there is no heter whatsoever for wine because the carbon doesn't cover wine. Loi, maybe it wouldn't even have the ability, you wouldn't be able to use it before the shtei alechem is brought. Kamash lan it's pulvekeret. Kol shekein hachad lo yiter klal. The wine never became Asher Machmas Chadosh. There's no Isser Chadosh on the wine at all. It only applies to the 5 grains. So therefore, surely you'd be able to use it for Nesachim even before the Shtei Alechem. Boy Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama has an interesting shayla. Shtei Alechem, Ma'u Sheyatiru Shalok Yisidron. Do you have to have the wheat first go through the Omer and then go through the Shtei Alechem and then it becomes mutter to be brought as a carbon? Does that have to be in order? What if the wheat was not around at all by the carbon omer, and the first carbon that it was around for was the shtei alechem? So you still need the omer, but maybe the shtei alechem of this year, and then you wait for the omer of next year. So it encountered the heter of the shtei alechem before the heter of the omer. Would that be good, or would you have to wait now for the next shtei alechem? Hechadami, what would be the case? You planted this wheat between Pesach and Shavuos, and therefore and then the shtei alechem passed because Shavuos arrived, and we still couldn't eat the wheat because you have to wait for it to pass through an omer. So you waited until next Pesach, and now it's after next Pesach. So this wheat saw shtei alechem first, and then the omer. Do you say kesidron sharion shaloi kesidron loy sharion? Do you say that if it's only in order will it work? And therefore, you couldn't use this new wheat until after next Shavuos. And you would be able to use this wheat already between Pesach and Shavuos. Omar Rabba Toshma. The imtak of minchas bikurim, b'imtak of minchas bikurim. The pasuk says the halacha of minchas bikurim, which is referring to the minchas omer kasav medaper. So, what are you makriv by the minchas omer? What type of grain is it made out of? Zok to bryce of minasayin. It's made out of barley. Are you sure it's minasayin? Maybe the minchas omer is brought with wheat. Rabbi Eliezer says, never aviv b'mitzrayim. It says aviv where we discussed the makkah board of Mitzrayim, and it said that the sa'ira was aviv, and therefore it didn't get ruined. V'nemar aviv l'doiris, and he used the word aviv when he discusses the minchas omer. The Torah there was referring to barley. Is that refers to barley. That's how we know the carbon omer is made out of barley. From Akiva Omer, Matinu Yochid Shemevi. The Shita changes the gears here. Matinu Yochid Shemevi maybe the Dvasai Menachitin v'Chavasai Menasayrin. You find a Yochid can bring a Mechas Adav from Chitin, and the Mechas Chiyuv like a Chayte is brought from Sayrin, like a Pesoita. B'tzibur you also find by Mechas Tzibur Shemevi Nidvasai Menachitin and Meviin Chavasai Menasayrin. Therefore, if you're going to tell me that the Minchas Omer can be brought from Chitin, if Rabbi Akiva's whole limud is from the fact that a carbon tzibur of Chayv is from Siren, what carbon tzibur of Chayv is from Siren? The only option is going to be the carbon Omer, so therefore it must be that the carbon Omer is brought from Siren. Davar acher, imata omer that omer baman achitin. If you're going to say that the carbon omer is made out of wheat, ein shtei lechem bikurim. Then the shtei lechem won't be bikurim because the Torah says the shtei lechem is bikurim, meaning its debut. It's the first time you're going to use the new crop on the mizbeach. It's the first time you're going to use the new crop in the base of mikdash. But if you were already using wheat for the carbon omer, well, then how is it the debut on Shavuos to use the wheat for the Shtei Alechem? Zog to Gemara. Ve'imi, so the Shtei Alechem shaloi kisidron sharyan. If you're going to tell me that the Shtei Alechem will be matir, even shaloi kisidron, I have a scenario where I can use wheat for the carbon omer and still have new wheat with a new debut to be used for the Shtei Alechem afterwards. How would you have that? Mishkachas lo de makriv omer mehanach de ashrus koidem l'shtei alechem. The omer of next year you can use for that carbon omer. You can use from the crop that you planted between Pesach and Shavuos last year. So therefore, you're using wheat for the omer. Ubasar ha'omer the ishtaket, but it was after the omer of last year. So you're using this wheat that only passed by Shtei Alechem, and now you're using it for the omer of this year, and that won't be a problem because even though it's out of order, even though it first passed the Shtei Alechem, and then it passes the omer, it's still acceptable on the mizbeach. Shtei Alechem and the Shtei Alechem of the next year, mehanich the ashrish koidem lo-omer the hashta. The Shtei Alechem will be used from a later crop that was planted after last Shavuos, and therefore it was never used until now, this next year Shavuos, so it made its debut. So you can satisfy the need for chitin for the omer, and still it won't take away from the wheat that's going to be freshly debuted for the next Shavuos carbon. That works if you hold that this system works even if the Shtei Alechem came before the omer. So to Gemara, the hashta, so nochmal. If you did it, mishkach the makriv omer mahanach the ashrus kodim l'Shtei Alechem. The omer of next year you can use from product that already encountered the Shtei Alechem of last year. Uvasar ha'omer dishtaket, but it didn't pass through the omer of last year because it was planted in between Pesach and Shavuos. Shtei Alechem of this year, you know what type of grain you'll use for that? Mehanach the ashrish koidem lo-omer the hashta uvasar Shtei Alechem dishtaket, and use the wheat for the Shtei Alechem that was planted after last Shavuos. So therefore, it will be fresh new wheat that never was used until Shavuos. Zog to Gemara, that wouldn't work. Because mi savris, bikurim, when it says bikurim, do you think what it means is, turning on to Samach Testament Aleph, you think what it means is lepera karminon? You think it's talking about just that you never used it before? It's lemizbeach karminon, and you look at it from a seasonal perspective. Who cares if some of the wheat was planted before Shavuos, and some was after Shavuos, it's all one crop, and this crop would have already been used. And by using these pairs for the carbon oimer, if you use wheat, it's already considered like it's using the new crop, and the new crop is not supposed to be used on the Mizbeach until Shavuos. Okay, let's stop here. Bez Hashem, tomorrow we will be Mamshech. Tomorrow is Shabbos, so we're going to learn Motzoi Shabbos at 9:30. Everyone should have a wonderful, wonderful day.